Okay, in 3, 2, 1, rolling.
So, a lot of my friends that are foreigners, they always ask me, like, what if you're a foreigner and you get married in the Philippines to a Filipina? And I did some research on it, and I found out that even a foreigner who gets married to a Filipina here in the Philippines can still get divorced. Even though there's no divorce law here,
Yeah.
they can kind of go back to their home country, file for divorce, and then they can send the paperwork to the Philippines, and the Philippines will recognize it. Just like a lot of my friends have wanted to get married, and they don't want to get married in the Philippines just for that reason of no divorce, right? But I always say, but wait a second, you're not going to get married because there's no divorce law. That already sounds like you're already setting yourself up for failure, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but I understand it, so I get it. And so I've seen a lot of people, even Filipinos who marry Filipinos, going to Singapore to get married, or even you can get married as a Filipina in the U.S. online. I don't know what other countries offer online marriage certificates, but
But
the
there are
United
online
States.
marriage.
Yeah. There's
It's new to me.
yeah. So you
Because
can get married.
I'm not yet married, so I
You
don't
can
have any idea about it.
yeah, you can get married online in the United States. There's plenty of people. They'll officiate it via Zoom call, and then you just have to have a witness for both parties. And as long as you agree to it by the power invested by the state of Nevada, they marry you and they give you a legal document in the United States that you're married. Now, there's some preliminary stuff you have to do, like you have to send documentation proving that you're not married, proving that you're of legal age to marry. There's a bunch of legal stuff. But it makes sense. I mean, they started doing it during the pandemic. They made online marriages legal.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
By the way, what happens to the citizenship of, I mean, on that online marriage? Do you become dual citizen?
If you
Or-
if you become if
For
you
example,
marry
I'm a Filipino. Then
Right.
is that online marriage applicable to me? For example, I want to marry a Nevada woman. Then
Right.
Is it am I qualify for that if I'm single?
to marry, yes, of
Yeah.
course, yes. But there's citizenship is completely something different,
Yeah.
right? So even if you marry an American, you don't immediately get citizenship.
All right.
You have to go through a process, and that process takes a while. Now, most people get married, and then they try to move their spouse. Let's say, to give you an example, let's say an American wants to marry a Filipina. He marries her here in the Philippines. It will take about 2 years for him to get a fiance visa approved for her to go to the United States.
Alright.
Unless she already has a tourist visa, then she can go, right? And then when she arrives in the US, she can apply to stay. But to avoid a lot of marriage fraud, they really are very attentive to cases of Americans marrying foreigners and
Yeah.
bringing them in and trying to get them green cards, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the famous
Okay.
green card comes from, right? So if an American marries a Filipina, or an American marries a Filipino, if the American is a female, for example, then what would happen is that she would petition for her spouse, or he would petition for the spouse, and then try to get him over. It takes about 2 years, and that's about the time it takes for them to really, to determine whether or not you have a significant relationship, and there's all kinds of things that they look for. Obviously, they want to see that you're living together. They want to see that you're consummate your
Yeah.
marriage, that you have a relationship, a real relationship. It's not that you can't. You can't just say I'm married and we're married. Here's a
Yeah.
legal document. You have to have supporting documentation showing that you're actually in a relationship, an actual marriage.
Yeah.
But it's still. I mean, marriage fraud still exists. It still happens in all countries, actually,
Yeah.
not just the U.S. Other countries have different reasons, but. And then, once you apply for your green card, a green card is really because you plan on living in the United States. If you're not going to live in the United States, there's really no reason to have a green card.
card.
You might as just have a visitor's visa. You know what I mean? And then you can come in as much as you want. Once you get a B1, B2 visa from the U.S., it's good for 10 years. And then after 10 years, as long as you stayed in the same, as long as you stayed within the law, and then your situation is somewhat the same, that you're able to afford your trips back and forth, then you can renew your visa, and it's very simple.
Yeah.
And in fact, renewing a visa is you don't even have to go for another interview. They usually have a visa waiver,
Yeah.
interview waiver, and that interview waiver allows you to just get it
Yeah.
within a week
But
renewed.
but actually that's new to me. I mean, like, I thought the Philippines was like, oh, it's easy to marry here in the Philippines. You got a partner, but no, actually it's more it's easier. You know, I mean, we don't have
Yeah,
online
yeah.
marriage actually.
Yeah.
Although there's a due process, certain process in doing it, but I mean, you're like doing the trial and error on the first hand. You have the 2 years period to know each other before you get married or what.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah,
I think we need to have that here in the Philippines, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a form of like it's like a prenup something, but it's like a because for the Philippines what we do is like there's a ring, there's a promise ring. You're my fiance, and the only contract that you have is that ring
Right.
that you can give to everyone. But that
Right.
online marriage is like it's like a startup that we can start together as a fiance,
Right.
and you have the ring, then you have that contract. Then
Right.
let's see after 2 years if we're good. Maybe we
Right.
can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's to be honest with you, that would be the ideal thing is people should have to have, should be living as married for a certain time.
Yeah.
You know, that would be even
Yes,
good, right?
cohabitating, at least.
Yeah. So in other words, once you decide that you want to marry this
Yeah.
person, you then go into
The church or-
no, well, you could go into a church, but then instead of what you do is you enter into like a marriage, and then for 3 years, that 3 years, say for example,
Yeah.
is a trial period. If it all works
Yeah.
out and you can live amongst each other with no problems, because that's another thing I always tell people. Like, I could never understand one, not being in a marriage where you've never lived together before.
Yeah.
You've never had sex together before.
Yeah.
You've never shared responsibilities
Yeah.
before. And then all of a sudden you're married.
Yeah.
Now everything changes,
Yeah.
right? Now, of course, you've never lived with each other before. So how difficult is that? Maybe you were not compatible living together. Sex. You've never had sex before. As long as both of you have never had sex, well, I guess that's okay.
Yeah.
But if one of you has been sexually active and the other one is a virgin,
Yeah.
then that becomes complicated
Yeah,
because,
that's-
maybe there's not enough spice in the life,
Yeah.
right? And then third, obviously, financial reasons. I mean, I would say that, in my opinion, obviously, this isn't something statistical, but I would say, in my opinion, probably the majority of marriages fail because of financial issues,
Yeah.
right? That's the first place. And then I think the second would be other reasons. But
Actually, the other reason, actually, that's one of the big factor, the financial stability of one of the spouses. And here in the Philippines, actually, it came up not only in the form of marriage, but also the extended family, like we were talking earlier.
yeah,
Like it's not just about the spouses and your child that is your responsibility,
Yeah.
but also the family. I'm not saying that I'm against it. It's not a mandatory to everyone, but it's like become a culture
right.
to us Filipinos to give back to the family, and sometimes it is abusive.
Yes. Well, and that's the challenge, right? For foreigners, at least from a guy who grew up in the United States, our parents were the ones that always saved us, right? So my parents always saved me if I needed money, if I had problems, I always went to them, right? That was the way it is, because they were more established and everything else. Just like I always say, you know why a lot of younger Filipinos will go for older men? The
Yeah.
reason is because they're more stable. They have
Yeah.
they've established themselves. They have a steady paycheck coming in.
They become breadwinners,
Right,
literally.
exactly. So it's a lot easier for them, as opposed to the younger guys who are trying to find their
Yeah.
careers, who are trying to make a thing. That is a lot more challenging in a relationship,
Yeah.
because maybe they have a job today, they don't tomorrow. Well, so many factors can come into play with that, right? But I think that's one of the main reasons that you see a lot of those big age gaps is because of that reason. And in the U.S., for example, if my brother needed money for something, of course I would help him out, as long as I have money.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give him money just to give him money.
Yeah.
Of course, if my mom or my dad or my parents, and my grandparents, whatever, if they were down on their luck, then I would give them to. But we're kind of, in the U.S., we're kind of brought up from the standpoint of being very independent. And because we're very independent, we still are very family. Like I grew up with the entire family coming home at Christmas, the entire family coming home at Thanksgiving, family, different engagements, things like that. Of course, everybody gets together. But the difference I find in the U.S., having lived here in the Philippines for about 6 years, the difference I find in the U.S. about siblings is that siblings don't necessarily, it's not very big that they will go far away for work. Imagine this. You have 5 siblings, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you have 5 siblings, and all 5 decide they want to be OFWs. They all 5 go work in different countries. Now they all 5 are residents of those countries.
Yeah.
When do they come home? Only at Christmas.
Yeah.
So sometimes that happens here, but that's very common in the United States. For example, my dad lives in Texas, right? So all of his kids live in different places, maybe outside the country, like myself, right? So every year we might not all come home. Why? Because travel's expensive in the United States. We're all career, children of his.
Yeah.
So we have our careers, and we all have families, right?
Yeah.
So we all have spouses and kids, so we have that responsibility. My mentality is that I understand that here in the Philippines, it's cultural and customary to give money to your grandparents, your extended family, things like that. But my mentality is only if they need it. If they need something because they don't have a way to eat, then you should do that. But you also have to remember, in the United States, there's a lot of programs that make it easy for them. For example, you have Social Security payments to the elderly. They have Meals on Wheels. They're fed. The thing about an American is, an American never has to worry about food, and never has to worry about a roof over their head. There's programs in the United States that will cover everyone. That's why you don't see the poverty that you see here. Now, maybe if the Philippines changed the way that they did things, then that culture would change,
Yeah, I think
right?
maybe it's not the problem of the family or the extended family. Maybe the right term is we have these grandparents, we have these senior citizens, they cannot even work. But the thing is, they don't have any financial support from any agencies that must be doing
Right.
like the US is doing.
Right.
And they don't have any choice but to go to their grandchild or to their
Right.
son, their daughters, like for their foods, and I think it's not their problem. They work very
Yeah.
hard for many years.
And I think that's the challenge, right?
That's
I think
the challenge.
The true challenge, because we have to remember this. Our parents brought us into this world,
Yeah.
and they took care of us when we weren't able to take care of ourselves.
Yes.
When our parents get to where they can't take care of themselves, we should also take care of them.
Yeah.
And I understand that part about the culture, and I agree with that part of the culture. I understand that.
Yeah.
I also agree with the fact that there's no programs here that take care of your elderly.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of, not to get into a political conversation, but we are in the political climate right now where people are running for office and
Yeah.
Senate and congressmen, women,
Everyone.
right? I think that would be a great opportunity for somebody to put money in our seniors' pockets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, here in the Philippines, if you're above 60 years old, you're considered a senior, right? So you get senior discounts for everything,
Yeah.
right? But that's great to get a discount. But it's not great if you don't have an income coming in, right? So if you don't have a good pension or the amount of money coming in, it's not enough. And unfortunately, the challenge here is the cost of wage is very low.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, when we get paid wages in the United States, they take out money. Why? To fund our Social Security from when we're older, to fund different programs. Our taxes go to fund those programs. So that's the challenge. But it's going to be very interesting because with the president's new initiative and hiring Elon Musk to oversee Doge, to cut government spending, to find the fraud, abuse, and waste.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, we can talk about that
Yeah,
sooner. It's a
yeah.
good,
I think that's going to be a big, huge benefit to everybody.
and that's the thing that we need here because there are lots of programs, there are lots of projects, there are funds because we pay taxes. That's the thing, we pay taxes, but where do those taxes go?
Right,
On fraud accounts, on whatever accounts that we don't need. Where are those? I think
Right.
that's that we don't have enough regulation.
right.
I think that's the problem. I think you can teach us something, some tips about that. Maybe some of
Yeah.
our listeners will learn from it.
Well, I think also there's a, I mean, in my opinion, every government is corrupt. Every government has some form of corruption. It's just how they go about it, right?
Yeah.
But the key is, I think that if Philippines digitalized more, then they would have an opportunity to see where all that money is going and be able to adjust
Yeah.
some of the issues.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, maybe we can talk about that. Of course, now we talk about relationships. So we talk about
Yeah.
it's about relationship,
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
exactly.
two-way.
Yes.
But I'm really interested on some things because like what we've talked about earlier about the online marriage. I thought that it's just a scam when I hear
Yeah.
those things.
No.
But it's really
No,
existing.
it's a legitimate way to get
Yeah.
married. And sometimes what happens is, for example, an American may be in the U.S. and a Filipino may be here. They can get married in two different countries,
Yeah.
right? So in other words, the Filipino can be here with her witness.
Yeah.
The American can be in the United States with his witness. They can all be on a Zoom call and
Yeah.
all get married legally in the United States. And that's what happens a lot of times. What happens is they get married legally, and then what happens is the American will file a petition to bring the fiance or his wife over. They call it fiance even if they're married,
Yeah.
but it's basically the same thing. And then they go through the process of getting them there and getting them through the process to legitimize everything. But it's a fair process. It's a long-term process. It's not easy, but it's fair.
But that's the example of digitalized way of doing it because it's a digitalized era, so we need to cope up with that, right? So the
Well,
time's moving so fast.
Look, I mean, if a doctor can get on a video call with you and evaluate you and
Everything.
give you medication, then I don't think that I would rather, I'm less likely to trust a doctor
Yeah.
than somebody who's marrying you, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, so
There's a point.
there's a big difference between that. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think that everybody looks for relationships around the world
And
in,
by the
in
way,
different locations.
relationship around the world. Okay,
Yeah.
because I'm a Filipino, by
Right.
the way, brother. Of course, how do you find Filipinas? Because for me, Filipinas are very hospitable, and I am proud that Filipinas are really pretty.
Right, right,
They're,
of
for me,
course.
they're not exotic.
Of
They're
course.
pretty. Their skin is so smooth. I've seen many races.
Right.
Filipinas are naturally smooth and they smells good.
Right. No, 100%.
How about you as an
of
American?
Course, 100%. I mean, is Filipino women are one of the top women in the world because obviously they're like number 3 in the number of Miss Universes won.
Yeah,
Right.
That's why.
I think a lot, to be honest with you, and this is can spark some opinion on it.
Yeah.
But even then, I think that Filipinas are a mixture. That's why they become just like Americans.
Yeah.
We become very ethnicity, mixed.
Yeah.
And because our ethnicity is mixed on a lot of times, I think that that's what happens here in the
The
Philippines
perfect
as well.
blend. There's like
Right.
a blend.
Right.
There's a certain.
So
things
I mean,
that's
if you
unique.
look at let's talk about like the last Miss Universe winners, right? So Catriona Gray,
Yeah, Triana Gray is a mix.
right? Catriona Gray mix, right? I don't know how many before that are, but I would say the majority of them are mixed.
Almost half.
Yeah, even the latest Miss Philippines
Is half.
is half,
It's
right?
either half Mexican, half Filipina, half
Right.
American, half Filipina. It's
Right.
always that race.
And the same thing with Americans. Americans, here's the thing is, you can have a girl who was born to a Filipino American man and a Filipino American woman, and she's born American, but she's really Filipino, born in the U.S., and she can win Miss Universe as Miss America,
Yeah.
right? Why? Because of the diversity within the United States. And I think the Philippines has become very diverse.
Yeah, having 7,100 islands and more, it really
I
is.
mean, I mean, I don't know what cultures I have not seen here.
Yeah.
For me, to be honest with you, although it is predominantly Filipino
Yeah.
culture, I would say that the Philippines is very close to an America, in my opinion, in the sense of all the different cultures. Because I've met Chinese, of course, all
Yeah.
different parts, people from this region, but I've met Brazilians here, I've met Colombians here, I've met, Europeans, tons of Europeans, Australians, a lot of them living here.
Yeah.
So I think that brings a culture here, a lot of mixed race. It just kind of
Yeah.
blends people together. And most people, I always joke because I ask them, oh, what is your ethnicity? They're like, oh, I'm Filipino. Yeah, but you don't look Filipino. So are you really
A Filipino.
all Filipino? Right? Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm 100% Filipino. Well, you look a little Spanish, so you should do a blood DNA. And
Yeah.
me, I did a blood DNA.
Is there a blood DNA? I don't know about
There's
it.
a blood DNA. And you do a blood DNA, and it'll tell you exactly where you're from. So, and it'll tell you exactly how much percentage you really are.
Do you have it here in the Philippines? That
I don't know that they have it here in the
But
Philippines.
in America there is.
But in America, yeah. So, for example, I did it, and I'm 27% Filipino from Ilocos Sur and Central Luzon, right?
They can trace it
They
all
can
over the
trace
world.
it to that area.
If you don't mind, how much does it cost? It is pricey.
It's not an expensive test. You can get it cheaper at times. They do a lot of sales. I think I've seen it as cheap as about 2,500 pesos.
I think I need to do that.
Yeah.
I want to. I'm
You know.
like a half. I'm saying always I'm half Filipino, half Spanish because of the surname. But
Yeah.
my surname is very common. Benitez and Moronia. I don't know where it came from.
Well, you should do it. If you do it, I'll share, and you share your information. We'll both share
Yeah.
our information.
I think it's
together on one of
somewhat
the upcoming
fun.
episodes. Yeah.
And it's like no, it's legit. See, I
Right.
have the documents here.
Yeah.
I made 35%, 20%, 10%,
Yes.
5% of it.
And here's the thing: is those DNA results in some countries they accept that for citizenship.
Yeah.
So, like, say for example, if you're, I don't know what the percentage is, but let's say your percentage is 20% Spain, lineage to Spain, then that might be enough to get you a Spain citizenship. Now, America, no, because America's a melting pot of
Yes,
cultures.
everything, yeah.
You're the true American
But
is.
in Spain,
and-
they have that like
right.
20% Spanish blood.
Yeah.
You can have that because my grandparents thought that it's a Spanish bloodline, the Benitez
Right.
bloodline.
Right.
Well, I need to go to America. I think I need that
Yeah.
blood DNA because I just heard it. I
Yeah.
heard it right now. Like for me to get that what you call that ancestral tree.
Right.
How you
Yeah.
call that?
Yeah.
It takes a long process. It's
Yeah.
there are lots of scam online. Like you will deliver
Yes.
your blood in there, then they will. How can you know that it's still my
Right.
blood?
Yeah.
I mean,
And in reality, it's the DNA test I took, and I'm not going to advertise for them, but the DNA test that I took uses your saliva. So
It's blood.
and you have to figure out how long is that, in my opinion, make sure that test is going to be the same when it arrives. But I'm telling you, it's extremely accurate. It's extremely accurate. And I'm telling you it's extremely accurate because I've had one person in my family who did it using all fake information.
Yeah.
Fake name,
Yeah.
fake address, used a computer not related to them, and put their
Everything.
DNA in there and sent it, and 100% it was legit. It came back exactly who that person was for the most part, as far as their genealogy, right?
Wow.
And then also, one of my titas, she did her DNA, and we found out that she wasn't part different ethnicities that we thought she was, meaning that she was blood relative, but not from the same cookie cutter, let's say, right?
Yeah.
So you can also find that out. The challenge for a lot of people, though, with DNA is once you put your DNA in that system, two things. One is people have access to it if they're your relatives. They can see that you did the test and that you actually showed to relatives. The second part of it that makes it difficult and challenging for people is that if you have kids outside your marriage or anything else,
you'll find it.
all of a sudden they take a DNA test and boom, you're in the same situation.
Oh my God.
So,
How many sons do I have?
yes.
Yeah, I will know. I will know.
Sons, daughters.
I'm
I
just
don't
joking.
care. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm 53 years old at this point in my life. If children pop up,
Yeah.
they're not going to be,
I mean, well, well, that
yeah,
happens.
yeah.
As long
So,
as you are accountable, why not?
yeah, and 100%. I mean, I've met family members that I didn't know existed
Yeah.
since I did the DNA. So I think it was a great opportunity.
Maybe
Yeah, so
maybe I'm a grandchild of a king.
you never know.
You
I mean,
never know.
anything's possible. So
I'll put it on my
yeah,
checklist.
on your
Yeah,
your bucket list,
yeah,
right?
it's my
Your-
bucket because I don't have like I have two things learned from you now, Rick. The online marriage and the what you call that, the blood DNA.
Right, the blood DNA.
For this one, I'm learning more about your culture. I hope you're
Yeah.
learning more also
Yes,
about our
yes, yes,
culture.
yes,
In behalf of the Filipinos, it's not about all the bad side of what I'm talking about. It's about the culture that most common people are interested about us.
Yes.
Because we Filipinos, we're known for being hospitable. We're
Yes.
happy people. We're making fun of how we use our English language, but we're
Right.
doing it right. It's just somewhat funny to us because we're
Right.
not really maybe familiar.
Right.
Because Rick is when we do this podcast,
Right.
I'm like nervous because Rick is like a former diplomat. He knows English very well and many other things, and I'm like, what will I do in front of him?
Yeah.
It's like a 1 hour show and we're like different cuts.
Right, right.
Can I
right.
survive?
Right.
And it's like what you're telling about us about being because to be honest, we Filipinos are ashamed of using and it's not normal for us
Right.
to talk in your language.
Right, right.
How about you guys? How do you see us doing this?
No, I mean,
Um,
the thing about it is most Filipinos, to be honest with you, most Filipinos don't think they speak good English,
Yeah.
but they speak perfect English. I mean, the thing about it is like anything else. I'm sure you've even heard it in your own language, right? Even somebody you can tell the difference between an educated Tagalog speaker and a non-educated Tagalog speaker, right? But you can understand them, you can communicate all together. At the end of the day, no matter what language you speak, in my opinion, right? No matter what language you speak, communication as long as you can communicate, who cares? Whether you do it through translators, on your phones, whatever, as long as you can communicate, that's the most important thing. So, but I do have an important question for you because we're about to go over our time.
Yeah.
One question is, how do you feel as a Filipino, or how do you feel if, let's say, your daughter or your sister brings home a foreigner that into the house? I mean, what's your opinion? Like if you see like let's say, you have a daughter or you have a sister and then all of a sudden they say, oh, I want you to meet my new boyfriend. And the
Yeah.
guy that walks in, you're thinking, oh, one of my pares, my brothers from the Philippines, and she walks in and it's a foreigner. How do you feel? Does that set you off a little bit? Does it think, oh, she got lucky? I mean, what goes through your mind when you go through that? I mean, like for example, let's use it as your daughter, right?
Yeah.
Let's say your daughter one day she brings home an American, or
It's different because
a foreigner.
I don't even want to have a daughter actually because I'm like a happy-go-lucky guy.
Yeah.
But it's not on it's not on behalf of the Filipinos because some Filipinos will be happy.
Right.
But on my behalf, it's like I mean I have lots of friends like you and other
Right.
people, and
Right.
I'm with I've met with different culture.
Right.
It's like for me, it's just fine. But first, I'll ask them. First, do you do an online marriage? Second, have you taken your blood DNA? Let me check.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you Spanish, American citizen? What citizenship are you? Now, kidding aside, if my daughter brings some foreigner,
Right.
well, actually, for me, it depends. For example, you bring in an American or maybe a Russian. Of course, for me, I have a typical ideal man for my
Right.
daughter. If he is not a Filipino, at least this race. I
Right.
want this race. I mean, we are mixtures.
Right.
We Filipinos are known for our good mixtures. Of course, I want the mixture of the Spanish blood, the American blood, or let's say the British blood.
Mhm.
Now, if it falls on that category, well, let's say I'll be proud or prouder more than if she introduce someone on other races.
Yeah.
Maybe that is the thing. But in regards if that guy is a good one, if that guy can respect the family and my daughter, so it's fine with me. If they can work together, their relationship, it doesn't matter to me because at the end of the day, it's about the welfare of my daughter.
Yeah.
Whatever makes her happy doesn't matter. Even if that's a guy or that's another gender, it doesn't matter to me. It's
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
If she fails, I can make another one, another daughter. No, no,
Yeah.
wait, I'll give, just joking again. Again, I'll get, I'll also, just before we end the show, I'll also ask you the same question.
Okay.
What if you have a daughter, and she introduced you a Filipino, not
Yeah.
a foreigner, specifically a Filipino, how would you feel?
Well, of course, I'm blood of a Filipino, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to be happy no matter what. But I think the same way. I don't look at people's. One thing about growing up in a household where you're a mix of cultures is you don't care about the person's skin color. You don't care about the location they were born. You don't care about what languages they speak. You pretty much just care about what kind of person they are. Are they a good person? Are they going to be a good person to your daughter? Are they going to be able to provide for her, or are they going to break her heart? And like most men like us, we would give them the advice of, "You break my daughter's heart, I break your face."
Yeah,
Right?
and break your bones.
Yeah.
And your whole generation.
Yes, your entire
Yeah,
life.
it's
I will
always-
break your entire
especially
life.
if that's the
right?
daughter, especially if
Yeah.
that's the only daughter. Oh,
Yeah.
it's a different story.
But we all know that relationships sometimes they don't last. So
They
in
fall
reality-
or whatever.
Right. But we would always.
Support.
I think that's the best thing. But again, I think it comes from having cultural awareness and things like that, and I'm hoping that with this show that we can bring everybody more cultural awareness.
Yeah.
Moving forward, and the differences and a lot of the similarities. So, but I think that's it for today.
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
That's our first episode, and hopefully we can actually we have tackled different side information, and,
Right.
and I think we can discuss more. If you've listened to our podcast, you can comment on us or you can message us if you want us to elaborate
Yes,
about all those topics.
Please comment on
Yeah.
down below on topics you'd like us to discuss, things you'd
Yeah.
like us to explore more of,
Yeah.
questions.
Questions, whatever question it is, as long as we can answer that, well,
Yeah, and if we
Let's do
can't,
it.
we have Google.
yeah,
Just-
AI. Just
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, cut.